Hello and welcome back to Yorkshire Talks, the place where we feature the people, the places and the generally weird and wonderful goings-on in God's own county. I'm Christine Talbot.
And I'm Matt Jameson. Welcome again. Some of you may remember me from a little TV show called Married at First Sight UK. And we're here talking to some incredible people, as Christine said, to find out what makes Yorkshire so unique in this fabulous county of ours.
And we both got the beige memo today.
Yeah, we got the memo today.
Yeah, for people who are listening and can't see this on YouTube, we are both wearing beautiful shades of beige.
Beige, but looking fabulous, Christine, as ever.
Beige jumpers, it's the fashion. Yeah, well, today we're going to meet an amazing man. He's an incredible Yorkshireman who turned his life around after losing a limb in an horrific accident which almost claimed his life.
Yes, Andrew thought his life was over when he was hit by a vehicle while broken down on the hard shoulder in North Yorkshire. It was touch and go for a while and Andrew had his leg amputated. But he's here to talk about everything that went on at that time.
And basically that he refused to become a victim. It's lovely to have you with us, Andrew Simister. Welcome to Yorkshire Talks.
Thank you very much. I didn't get the memo, as you can see, because I'm in black and white.
He's in a black, very nice T-shirt, which we'll learn what you've got written on it. We will hear more about later. Andrew, how would you describe, first of all, life before this accident? When did this accident happen? It was 2022.
Yeah, February the 25th, 2022 is the day that changed my life forever. Before that, married, successful business, quite athletic. I'd cycle a lot, run a few marathons, I used to coach football, and very active. And then suddenly your life changes forever because of a mistake of a driver.
What actually happened?
I hadn't actually broken down. I'd been to get an MOT at Optimum Bikes on the A64, and when I came out, my jacket I hadn't done my belt up properly.
And this is on a motorbike.
Yes, it was a very big Harley Davidson. It was a white Harley Davidson. I'd bought myself a white helmet 2 weeks previously because I wanted to be more visible to other motorists.
And you'd look pretty smart as well, I'm sure.
Yes, and my wife actually videoed me leaving the house on my motorbike, which was to be my last journey on a motorbike on two wheels with two legs. And as I came out of Optimum Bikes, I realised that my belt was unfastened and it was distracting me because it was flapping. And the irony is that accidents are caused by distractions. So I pulled into the first lay-by that I saw. And as I was in the lay-by, fastening up my belt, this driver of a pickup truck was allegedly dazzled by the sun and didn't see me and hit me from behind at about 65 miles an hour.
Goodness me. So can you describe the moment that you realised something, or were you aware of anything happening?
I think because it came from behind, I didn't get a sense of what was going to happen. Apparently the witnesses that saw it realised what was going to happen and it's affected them very badly, but I was oblivious to what was going on because it came from behind. And I had this sensation, suddenly this massive impact, this massive explosion, an explosion of energy going through me as I was catapulted through the air. And all this debris around me, and the next thing I remember, I was waking up face down on the A64, looking at traffic going past, but also realising that I had a very bad pain in my right leg, which I assumed was in an upright position like that, because a lady came to me, and I said, "Can you put my leg down, please?" And she obviously didn't realise that I thought my leg was in the air, but it was smashed to smithereens, multiple compound fractures. And I think the worrying thing was that it was to do with my artery as well, the femoral artery, which is why the air ambulance was called.
So they basically, it was a major accident. They had to close down the carriageway of the A64, didn't they?
Yeah, I think it was closed for 3 or 4 hours.
Yeah. And people were stopping to help, but...
Yes, I was very fortunate that 2 members of the public stopped. Obviously, the driver of the other vehicle was there. But there was some, I remember looking up, and there's cars going past slowly and people leaning out and taking photographs of me.
That's unbelievable.
But people do that. They rubberneck at accidents and they want to see gory things, don't they? And the first 3 calls that went into 999 was that I was dead. So those were the first 3 calls. And the irony is that from a TV point of view, one of the first police cars that responded had the traffic cops film crew in it. So they responded to it, and then everything, I think, is filmed by the air ambulance. So I was on traffic cops and helicopter ERs. So, which was
Wow.
It was first time I saw the helicopter ER footage, it was shocking, and I had to have 5 minutes on my own when I got my head around what I'd seen and what I'd actually gone through, because apart from the obvious state of me after my accident, they started to give me morphine and ketamine, so I wasn't really aware what was going on. But there's one stage when they actually have to straighten my leg, and it's a compression. It's a bit like a compression tube that they put around my right leg to get the bones and everything back into place, and it inflates, and you can hear me screaming, and you can see the blood spray.
Oh, God.
And I remember at one stage saying, "Am I going to die?" That comes in one of the clips as well, because it was very touch and go whether I would live.
It sounds it. It sounds it. Interestingly, with the crews that were there, the filming crews, do you have to give permission then for them to be able to use that footage afterwards?
Yeah, the police came to see me in the hospital after my amputation, and they told me that the traffic cops had been there, and would I give permission for me to be on the TV show? And I thought, yeah, because people have to realise that perhaps lay-bys aren't safe spaces. I assumed it was, and there I was minding my own business, and I'm almost killed in a safe space. So if it helps save somebody else's life and prevents an accident, then that was one of the reasons why I did it.
Yeah, I mean, another topic for another day, but it begs I wonder what your views are on these smart motorways where there is nowhere to pull over, and people are having accidents on there, aren't they?
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, but you actually say there, although you were conscious, which is amazing after having had what you had, you actually thought this is it. Did that feeling go through, and how did you deal with that in your head at the time?
I think there were 5 times when I came into consciousness after the accident. The first was, and I was conscious enough and had the presence to be able to tell this. All I could see were legs, and I realised that one was the female legs and male legs. And this lady came towards me, and I said, "Look, my phone's in my top pocket. Can you get it? This is the code to get in. Can you phone my wife?" And my wife didn't answer. So I said, "Could you phone my brother, David?" And so he got the call from this lady to say that I'd been involved in an accident on the A64, and I would be going to hospital. And then the next time I woke up was it wasn't the paramedics, it was the fire brigade were the first to respond. And I asked that question, why? And apparently out of the 3 emergency services, the busiest, I think, more than likely, are going to be the ambulance service, then it's the police, and then it's a fire brigade. And because there was a vehicle, there could have been petrol, that's why the fire brigade responded. And they do have a certain amount of first aid experience as well. And then I remember the paramedics coming and being asked if they could cut me out of my clothes. And I thought, well, that's strange. Because I couldn't, all I thought was I had a sore leg. I thought my leg was broken. I didn't realise how bad it was. And then I heard the helicopter blades. So I thought, there's a helicopter somewhere. It didn't quite focus my mind that it was the air ambulance coming. And then the next time I woke up, I've gone through some roadworks in an ambulance, and I remember waking up thinking, why aren't I in a helicopter? The air ambulance came, but I'm in an ambulance. And I found out later on it was to do with the time to get me from that part of the A64 to the LGI would have been a lot quicker by the road than it was getting me into a special stretcher, taking me to where the helicopter was, that taking off and then landing again.
Okay.
So it was quicker for me to go by road. And then I remember waking up screaming in one of these scanners, whether it was a CT scanner or MRI. And then the next time I wake up, it's Saturday morning with my wife at the side of me, some consultants, I couldn't tell you how many there were, and also a very good friend of mine who's a cardiac consultant at the LGI was on the other side. And he was able to, he understood all the doctor's jargons and the surgeon's jargons of what was going on and tell it to me in layman's terms, what was actually going to happen. And they said about amputating my leg, and the thought of that terrified me. And I said, you can't do it, you've got to save my leg. And they performed an operation where they took a vein out of my left leg, a donor vein, all the way from my ankle, all the way to my groin, and put it in my right leg, and they saved my foot. The blood supply had been lost to my foot, but they saved it. But the rest of the leg was too badly damaged. So I have very little memory about what happened from that Saturday to the Wednesday, March the 2nd, when my leg was amputated.
And how did that feel then at that point?
Horrific.
Were you given the news then that was going to happen when operation?
I don't know. I was on such strong painkillers, the ketamine, the morphine, I had some fantastic hallucinations, I have to say. But on a point of view, it took me out of it totally. I thought I was in a factory. I kept saying to my wife, why am I in a factory? I couldn't work out I was in a hospital. Your mind has gone. Yeah. I had no idea whether it was day, whether it was night. I didn't eat. They must have been giving me fluids, but I don't remember eating. I don't remember anything apart from a lot of pain. And my wife said, I was screaming a lot in agony.
Gosh.
But my wife, after one of my operations, my wife phoned the recovery department, and the nurse that answered, she says, I have to tell you, your husband is one of the funniest people I've ever met. We have had staff who did not want to finish their shift because of what your husband has been coming out with. She said, he's incredible. The stories, he's obviously, he's on ketamine and morphine, but we have been in fits of laughter, all of us, and he's made a huge difference to our day. So I have no idea what I came out with.
Oh, I'd love to know that. Yeah, maybe that is another podcast altogether. Yeah. But then, obviously, you waking up and what was the moment at which you saw that your leg and realised, life was going to be different? I
couldn't even look when Tess said to me, she said, they've amputated your leg. I was in absolute turmoil, in bits. And that was about 7 o'clock on the Wednesday night. And I think for at least 14, 15 hours I was in tears, floods of tears. My cousin spoke to me well after my amputation. She said, do you not remember phoning me, Andrew? My wife shouldn't have given me my mobile phone. And she said, you were in floods of tears, you were in hysterics, you didn't know what you were going to do. And I said to the sister in the ward, I don't know what to do with myself. I can't get my head around that. My leg's been amputated. I need to speak to somebody who's close to God, is what I said. I don't care, man, woman, Jew, Christian, Muslim. I want to speak to somebody because I've got to get my head around this. And a chap from church services came to see me called Andrew.
This was at the Leeds General Infirmary.
Yeah, about 4 o'clock on the Thursday afternoon. And he said, I gather you've asked to see me. Why? And I said, I've had my leg amputated. And I said, I can't stop crying. And he said, well, Andrew, he said, when there's death, there's grief, and part of grieving is crying. And he said, what you're doing now is the grieving process. And I burst into tears. I said, yeah, but I want you to thank God for saving my life. And I grabbed his hands and I said, please pray. And, I'm not a particularly religious person, but somebody had saved my life. And I just grabbed his hands and he prayed for me. And he left, he gave me something which I will show you a bit later. And once he left, I knew I'd be okay. I accepted my leg had been amputated and I could get on with my life.
Yeah.
And, recovery is about acceptance. Without acceptance, you can't recover. And I suddenly thought, right, my leg's gone. What am I going to do with my life? And I had an electric car, and that was a really good example of how my life had become slightly different. When I was going to business meetings, I knew where I was starting, I knew where I was finishing, but because it was an electric car, I had to plan my journey differently because of having to charge. Was I going to have to leave earlier? Were there any stops in the way? And I thought, right, I know what I'm going to do with my life, but it's going to be different.
Right.
And I set my life then, or a goal then, that my life would be the same. It would be different, but it would be the same. Having one leg wasn't going to stop me from what I wanted to do. And I think the recovery is very much 80% mental, 20% physical. And once you've accepted it, you can get on with it. And my experience is dealing with other amputees, and especially the trauma victims, is they are the ones that tend to recover a lot better because it's totally out of the blue. A lot of people have amputations because of medical reasons. But I had the drive before my accident to have the drive to continue.
Right.
And that's what I did. And I heard my wife says, you were quite selfish before your amputation. She said, you're extremely selfish now because I am so self-driven about my recovery and what I'm going to do with it.
Because I'm friends with your brother, David, who we'll talk about as well a bit later on. And I remember thinking, he was telling me about how you were doing, and you were very quickly on your feet, learning to walk again. On your foot. Well, yes, learning to walk. I was amazed by the speed of it.
Yeah. Because I was an insurance claim, there was a lot of help from me, and I was extremely fortunate that I got that help very early on. And for anybody who doesn't have an insurance claim, that has to go through the normal channels, is very difficult. And my life started with obviously the time that I had in LGI, and I can't thank the staff enough for what they did for me with saving my life and how they dealt with me. All the staff, they were absolutely incredible. And when I started to go to Seacroft, which is the prosthetic centre in the north, the staff there dealt with me absolutely brilliant. And because I had such drive, actually in my first visit to the prosthetic centre, I tried a leg on and I was walking with a femoret, I think they call it, which is the basic leg for walking. And it was so difficult. And I said, I want to do as much as I can, as quickly as I can. And they have only about 2 or 3 patients a year that get, from the NHS point of view, at Leeds, Seacroft, a mechanical or bionic leg as such. And I was lucky enough to get one of those because of my drive and my goals of what I wanted to do. So very fortunate. But then I moved over to Manchester to a place called Dorset Orthopaedic, which is a private clinic, and I'm very fortunate because of the insurance claim has funded my leg for the rest of my life. My leg costs £100,000.
Gosh.
And I have to change it every 6 years.
Wow. Right.
And this was until last year the most up-to-date bionic leg, which it's the Otterbock Genium X3, the X4 has come out now. But in 4 years' time, hopefully I will change over to the X4. And this has given me the best chance of a recovery from an amputee's point of view. This leg is absolutely fantastic, and it has been crucial to the things that I can do.
That's incredible. And having that real positive mental attitude towards it all. And as you said, you had the drive to do that. Were there any moments where you were a bit despairing, Lee?
Oh, yeah.
And felt like...
Yeah, cried for days at times.
What's going on?
Got my first, trying to walk. People don't realise how difficult it is. I remember getting my first prosthetic leg, and I'd gone into a convalescent home for 2 weeks because my wife had gone to Alaska, and I didn't want my accident to affect her life. She'd had this trip planned with her uncle to go to Alaska, and I said, "Are you going to go?" I said, "I can go somewhere and be safe, and that's all I need to do. Somewhere safe, somewhere to look after me." So I went into a convalescent home, and they had very long corridors, and they had a lovely smooth tarmac path, and I would practice walking a little bit every day. And it was so painful, it was so tiring. But for those 2 weeks, I advanced quite a bit because I had that space and time to do it on my own, as well as going to the prosthetic centre. And it was great for me. But I would get despondent, to start with having a prosthetic leg and the feeling of it, and the tiredness, the blisters you get. It is very depressing at times, but you've got to work through that. And I took so much hope. When I was lying, recovering in the LGI, a friend of mine said, "You need to look at BBC iPlayer and look at the Billy Munger story." And he was a young motor racer who lost both of his legs, one below and one above the knee, in a horrific accident when he was racing. And I looked at and I watched his recovery program on BBC iPlayer, and it gave me so much hope. And from then on, I would go on Instagram and I would start to follow amputee and amputee athletes, male and female, to see what they were doing and what a fantastic life they had through sport, through other activities. But that's where I got my hope, and I thought, well, if they can do it, I can do it.
So was that where the first seed started of getting into sport again? And
yes, it was. Both my son and one of my friends said, "Oh, there's a fantastic sports come out called Padel tennis, and we think you could play it as an amputee." And I said, "Really?" And for those who don't know Padel, it's a cross between like squash and tennis, and it was invented in Mexico in the 60s, and it's enclosed. And I went and had a lesson, and I thought, I really like this. I used to play a bit of tennis when I was younger, jack of all trades and a master of none when it came to sports, and I thought, I can do this. So I thought, right, I need to find paddle players and other amputees, and I couldn't. And I contacted the paddle paper, and they heard about me and they did an article about me. And then I saw this organisation on Instagram, and I follow a particular Italian athlete called Alessandro Osala, who's an Italian para-athlete, run the 100 metres for Italy. And he was involved in an organisation called, which you can see it, the Inclusive Padel Tour.
Right.
And I sent him a message on Instagram that's saying, I've seen the Inclusive Padel Tour. If you come to England, I'd love to come and watch. And he sent me a message back saying, why don't you call me and get involved? And I thought, wow, I can't. I've had one lesson. And he phoned me up and he said, Andrew, this is what the organisation's about. It's about disability with sport. It doesn't matter your level of disability. It's inclusive and you can do it. And I happened to throw myself last year into a few holidays because I just wanted to live my life. And he said, the tour is starting again in January in Milan. And I said, right, I'll be there. And I had a few more lessons and I started to play. And I went to Milan in January. My son was my playing partner then.
Your son is Max.
Yeah, my son Max. Yeah, and he came out to be my playing partner because the concept of the Inclusive Padel Tour is every team is made up with somebody with a physical disability and an able-bodied player. Okay. And the physical disability players, if it's a leg disability, get 2 bounces, same as the wheelchairs. There's amputees who've got their arm missing. My first game was against a disabled player who had both of his legs missing. And
what does 2 bounces mean?
In normal tennis, you have 1 bounce before you have to hit the ball back. So as you're disabled and I can't run, the disabled players get 2 bounces. The ball can bounce twice. Right. Yeah. If it bounces 3 times, obviously you've lost the point. But for the first time since my amputation, I was with a group of people who looked like me. We all had a limb difference. I go to a health club in Leeds who are fantastic and they've done a lot for me, David Lloyd York. But people stare, and especially when I go swimming, I had little girls screamed when she saw me getting out of the swimming pool because I had a leg missing, and you suddenly think, oh God, is this how you make people feel? And I am conscious of that, and I do wear shorts, and people do stare. But when you've got 33 teams and everybody's got something missing, you're all the same. Yeah. And it has been so good for my mental health and my physical health. And the tour itself, culminates with... the tournaments are mainly in Italy because it's an Italian organisation. Next year it will be coming to the UK, possibly London or Manchester. I'd love to bring it to Slazenger in Leeds, but it's just if we can... Somebody will do very cheap flights into Leeds Bradford from all over Europe, bring it on because we can get the disabled players. We can host that tournament at Slazenger and bring the Inclusive Padel Tour to the UK for it to be hosted in Leeds.
It's so interesting to talk to you because obviously as a businessman, and you what was your business that you have?
Digital screen technology. If anybody knows the Trinity Shopping Centre when it opened, I got the order to supply all of the video walls. Right. So,
and do you still do that as well?
No, I had to take some time out after my amputation, and the final job I did was the big digital screen at Harrogate Town. So that was my leaving gift to the business was that order.
But it's obvious that the drive you had to create such a successful business, you've transferred now into this and basically could end up running this whole situation here in Yorkshire, in England, bringing it to England.
Yes, which is incredible.
It is, but it's finding there are other amputees out there who I'm sure other disabled people that would love to play a sport but don't know how to do it. Take a look at Padel. You just need to give it a go and realise that you can do it. I've met some incredible people in wheelchairs. At my last tournament in Venice, there was a lady came over from England, and her husband actually used to work with Christine at Calendar, and she's a wheelchair player, and she hadn't even thought about Padel. There's a young guy called Jack Binstead who used to be on a TV programme, Bad Education. He was Rem Dog or something.
Yes. I used to love that. I know what you mean,
children, because both my son and daughter came to Milan for my first tournament, and they said, oh my God, it's Rem Dog. And I thought, I don't know who this person is. And he's involved with it. And, I look at the level of the play that they have. Most of the Italian and European players, there's so many ex-para-athletes and current para-athletes as well. And just because you've lost a limb or you're in a wheelchair, it doesn't mean it's the end of your life.
I mean, it's only 2 years since this happened. But what has this whole new challenge, this whole new world given to you? How has it helped you?
Well, apart from making me more selfish, as my wife says, it has opened my eyes to how disabled people are treated. Not long after my amputation, my brother said to me, Disability Action Yorkshire are looking for trustees, because my brother used to do all of the PR for them. And he said, why do you get involved? And I said, why would I want to get involved? He said, because you're disabled. And I thought about it long and hard, and I thought, yeah, he's right. So I became a trustee of Disability Action Yorkshire, and I'm part of the Transport Committee Forum, and I'm involved with the Forum for Leeds Bradford Airport for accessibility, also part of the fundraising. We are hopefully going to be having an inclusive fashion show for disabled people, because just because you're disabled doesn't mean you can't look fashionable.
Yeah, exactly.
But clothes for disabled
That's
people
fantastic.
aren't fashionable.
Yeah.
And I've seen an Instagram site, I think it's Models of Diversity. I
Yes,
thought,
a friend
they
of
can
mine's
do it.
involved in it, Annie.
Yeah. So, and we're hoping to host this in Yorkshire as well for Disability Action Yorkshire. So they have very close links with Harrogate College of Further Education, as it used to be called, not sure what it is now. And they're going to ask them to design the clothes, and we will model them.
That's incredible.
That sounds amazing.
So you've kind of, you've turned a negative into a positive in a huge way.
In my early days of recovery, I read a book called Hybrid Human, and it's about a soldier who lost both of his legs in the Gulf, where I think it was Afghanistan. And he's been an amputee for a long time. And he said that he wouldn't, 10 years after his amputation now, would he go back to his old life? And I've thought about this long and hard, and the things I am doing now, I would never have done if I hadn't have lost my leg. Yeah, there are challenges, but the positives I'm getting out of my life now, I probably wouldn't go back to my old life. I can be a very angry disabled man, people that park in blue badge bays, people that use accessible toilets when they don't need it. It's things I did when I had two legs, and now I realise disabled people do get a bad time. And they need a voice, and not every disabled person will speak out. I do.
That's
sometimes to my detriment, unfortunately.
But no, that's amazing and truly inspirational that you've gone on this journey yourself, and then you're putting it back into the community and supporting everyone around you. And it really is inspirational.
I think they need a champion like you.
Yeah,
maybe
definitely.
Sometimes paths in life maybe take a turn for a reason, and maybe...
Yes, they do. And I'll tell you, my latest challenge is that I've got my first running blade. 19 years ago, when I was 40, I ran the New York Marathon with two of my friends. One of my friends sadly died 2 years after the marathon. And my other friend has gone through chemotherapy. And next year I will be 60. So it'll be 20 years after doing it the time before with two legs. It is my aim, whether it'll happen, because it's going to be a lot of hard work, is to run the New York Marathon this time next year. But the challenge I have right now is finding a running track and somebody in this area that will take a blade runner and teach them how to run and take them through this journey. So I'm looking for help with that. And most of the running clubs that have funding from the disability sports, it goes towards wheelchair racing, which is absolutely fantastic. There are very few blade runners out there. And I need that help to find somebody who will take me through it.
Somebody listening to this, forward with the answer. Yeah. You talked a lot about David and how David supported you through what happened to you. And then there was a big blow for you, massive blow, because David, who's your identical twin, suffered a life-changing stroke last year in 2023. That must have been very difficult to deal with. Yeah,
it was. When I was lying in hospital and the psychiatrist came to see me, and I said, I'm fine, I'm going to recover, don't worry about me, I'm absolutely perfect. And they said, at some stage you will have a crash. And I said, don't be ridiculous, it's not going to happen to me. And I didn't for ages. And then my identical twin David had a catastrophic stroke in March the 9th or March the 11th last year. And it sort of tipped me over the edge a bit. He'd been such a support for me, and then suddenly he's in intensive care. He had a stroke on the Saturday evening for various reasons. He wasn't taken to the stroke centre. He was taken to Jimmy's to be assessed. And I went to see him on this Sunday as he was there, and he was mobile, but he couldn't form many words. So the stroke had affected him. And then he was taken to the LGI. He said, you've had a stroke, it's passed, but you've also got COVID and you need a bit of recovery, really. So you're going to go to Harrogate. And then while he was in Harrogate, he suffered 2 more catastrophic strokes, which resulted in him having a life-saving operation to remove pressure from his brain, where they cut away part of his skull. But unfortunately, the stroke was so severe that it's left him both physically and mentally disabled. He's totally paralyzed down his right-hand side. And he's lost his ability to communicate. And David was a journalist. He knows Christine extremely well. He had his own PR company, and speech and everything like that was his life and his passion. And not long after that, really, I just decided that life was... I'd gone back to work literally the day after I came out of hospital, and then suddenly something had to give, and I thought, I don't want to work, I want to be away. My brother's never going to experience life, and I'm going to do it for both of us. And I started to travel. Life is for living. You never know what's going to happen. And I decided that my life would change for a few months. And I went to see a PTSD counsellor. And I spoke through a lot of the issues. It was what happened to my brother it just tipped me over the edge, really. And I did have help with that, psychiatric help, psychiatric. Because I don't mind what they call it. It helped
you are
me.
so close, you and David, and you must feel, although David is still very much, David, you've not got that shoulder to cry on, that person to lean on that you've had from birth.
Yeah, since before birth. We're in the womb together for 9 months. He, when he was a journalist, he was. They sent him to a hypnotist when he was at Harrogate Advertiser, and they regressed. And he said something about being in the womb, and there's somebody in here with me.
Did he?
So yeah,
Good
so it goes back that far. And I'm 15 minutes older than David, so he is. I've always been in his life, and he's always been in my life, and genetically we are the same. And then suddenly, it's a tragedy. Both of us have become disabled.
So did your own experience then help with what happened to David? After everything that you went through, I know that you said that it was a bit of a breaking point for you as well, but coming through that, did that help you deal with the situation?
No, it didn't actually. From a recovery point of view, it sent me back a little bit because I couldn't quite get my head around what had happened to him. And made me realise how lucky I was. I could have been killed. I could have had brain damage. Yes, I lost my leg, but I also broke my back. Right. And it was an undisplaced fracture. I didn't even know until I left hospital when I went through the list of my injuries. And I said, I broke my back. And, if that bone had moved slightly, I'd have been paralysed. And I was fortunate. I've got a chance to live my life. Yes, I might have one leg, but I've got everything else and I can do it. David's life is very difficult because of how he is. The brain injury for him it's horrific.
You're living life for both of you now.
Yeah, I am. And sometimes I feel guilty about it, then I'm doing these things and he won't. But if it's the other way around, I don't want him to get out there and do things, live it for me, because I'm not going to be able to. And he's always... He understands what I'm saying. He can look at an iPad, and my travels around the world with Padel, he'll point at where I've been. If I can tell him, like I went to Dubai, he'll take a look at that. He knows where I've been for the other tournaments. He can bring them up on his map, but he can't express himself. And we talk to him, and he still has a sense of humour. Like when he sees Christine, he always goes, "Hiya."
Which I always say, David, I am baffled because I do not say that, but obviously I do. No,
that's the link.
I love David very much. He's very much a big part of my life as well, and I know what you're going through. But as his twin brother, it's I can see that you're in a sense wanting to. Everything you're doing is perhaps as much for him as it is for yourself.
Yeah, it is. And the things I'm doing now is because of him. Disability Action Yorkshire, I wouldn't have done that without David. I wouldn't be becoming a champion of disability rights. Some of the... I wouldn't have followed amputees, disabled people. I went to the Paralympics because my friend, who I met through paddle tennis, was running for Italy, and I went to see him and cheer him on. I was in a taxi and I saw Tanny Gray Thompson coming towards me, and I met her through Disability Action Yorkshire. So I wound my window down and shouted out, "Tanny," and she came over and we had a chat. And these are people I would never have met or had time with if I hadn't to become disabled.
Yeah. Amazing. It is
amazing.
an amazing story.
It really, really is.
In a moment, I'm going to ask you what you're doing next, but just in the meantime, we have asked you to bring in two things. First of all, something that says Yorkshire to you as a Yorkshireman.
Yes.
What have you brought in?
Well, it's not just Yorkshire, it's where I was born and where I spent most of my life, and it's Harrogate. Now, most people would think it would be something from Betty's, but it's not. It's Farrah's Harrogate toffee. Now, for some of you who are Doctor Who fans... if you go back to the 70s, I can't remember if it was John Pertwee or Tom Baker had a tin of Farrah's Harrogate toffee.
Was that product placement in Doctor Who?
Back in the 70s.
Back in the 70s.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yes.
And what's something special that's special to you?
Well, I've thought about two things. One is obviously my leg, but I'm with this the whole day, every day. This has become part of my life and part of me. But when the Reverend came to see me in the hospital, he said, "I've got something for you, Andrew. It's a wooden heart." And he said, "It's got religious significance. It came from the cedar tree or something in Jerusalem." I mean, it might have, it might not have. I was on that many drugs, he could have told me anything and I'd have believed it. But that heart meant so much to me, and it was the heartbeat of life. And I grabbed onto this heart and I wouldn't let it go for 2 weeks in the hospital. And when I was moved from high intensity down to low intensity in the hospital, I lost my heart. And I was saying to all the nurses, "I've lost my heart. I can't find my wooden heart." And they thought, "What's he going on about?" And I found it under me. And I said, "There you go. It's my wooden heart. I've found my heart." And I was in tears because I'd found it. And one of the nurses, "That's absolutely incredible." And she found the Reverend and she got one. And I held on to this and I gripped this every day in hospital because it was my heart, it was my life. And that to me meant so much. And it's with me all the time. And so to the Reverend Andrew, if you're still there at the LGI, thank you so much.
What a lovely thing for him to do as well.
Yeah,
and it's perfect size
very
for
moving.
holding.
Very moving.
Yes. And gives you that
I could have a cry now thinking
I know,
about it.
I
It gives you that strength, doesn't it? And you just got that connection with it and everything.
So there you go.
So what's next for you then, Andrew?
Well,
what have you got on the horizon? You've got so much going on. You've been doing so much.
New York
already.
Marathon, fingers crossed.
As a Blade Runner.
November 2025 as a Blade Runner.
Wow.
Now, my son said he will run it with me because he ran his first marathon last year, which was in Dublin. And I said, "You've got two choices, Max, if you run this with me. You can run your own race and do whatever time you want." And he said, "No, Dad, I'm going to run it with you." And I said, "It might be very slow, but there might be a bit of walking as well." So that's the ambition, is because you have to set goals in life. I can't just sit back and do nothing. So that goal is to be a Blade Runner and to run a marathon. I'm 60 next year. I'm not going to be in the Olympics. I don't know if there's anything veteran-based. But I put a Facebook post lying in the LGI the Sunday after my amputation of the Wednesday, because people didn't know what had happened to me. And I said, here I am, had my leg amputated. Who knows? I could be a Paralympian. But the Inclusive Padel Tour is one step closer to that. I have world ranking points. I've never had those before. It's been a fantastic year from going there as a real novice to starting to understand the game and playing against incredible disabled opponents. The world number one wheelchair player, a Spanish chap, he's involved with it. Some of the amputees and limb differences who still have their knees, and it's a lot easier for them to run around. And to see them running around when they've still got half a leg missing, and to play paddle to the level they do is incredible. So that's on the horizon. I'm sure there'll be other things to do with Disability Action Yorkshire. Somebody's offered for me or asked me, would I be interested in doing an after-dinner speech about my story?
I could see you doing that.
Yeah,
I said, I have to think about it. A very good friend of mine who lives in America now, he was a director of Chelsea Football Club, and he got into the dinner circuit, the speech, because it was sport and business related, because he had an MBA. And I spoke to him about advice. He said, "Just do it, Andrew." just see what happens.
I think you'd be fantastic at that. That's definitely another telling your story to us today has been absolutely fascinating. So you would be brilliant at telling your story and getting the word out there. You're a force of nature, Andrew. It's been an absolute pleasure to chat to you today.
It really has, and an inspiration as well. So just as Christine said, I think you'd be fantastic at that, definitely.
Thank
Andrew
you.
Simister, thank you for talking to us today on Yorkshire Talks.
Thank you very much for having me.
And that's just about it for this episode, isn't it?
Join us next time on Yorkshire Talks, where we're talking to another amazing person from our great region.
Yes, and don't forget to like and subscribe. But from me and Matt, bye-bye for now.
Bye-bye.